Hello class. Today we are going to present about immigration regarding three countries from the Southeast Asia: Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. In other words, our close neighbors. Like other Asian immigrants, resettle their lives somehow in the United States might be the only chance they could survive. Lao People's Democratic Republic, or Laos, is located in Southeast Asia and it shares the southwest border with Thailand, Cambodia in the south, Burma in the west, China in the north, and Vietnam in the east. Laos has various of minority groups such as the Hmong Khmer, the Yao, and the Hmong. During the late 19th century, Laos had to deal with many invaders such as China, and King Unkam of Luang Prabang was forced to seek for the French help. Consequently, Luang Prabang and Vientiane had become the administrative capital of French Laos. But after French was defeated in World War II, the Free Lao or Lao Isala had a chance to declare Laos as an independent kingdom, though some might supported the French rule. The United States also deeply involved when they were trying to stop the spread of communism in Southeast Asia by funding both tactical and economic aid to the royal government, but they failed. However, there were about 2 million tons of U.S. explosives that were dropped on Laotian as a part of a conflict called the Secret War. It made Laos become the most heavily bombed nation per capita in history, and until today, much of it remains in the ground, still kills or injures about 300 people per year. In Laotian American, family is important. The Laotian immigrants are normally a large family who lives near each other because back in their homeland, they usually work together and provide goods for the neighborhood. Education is the main factor you don't mess with Laotian American parents. To be honest, it's quite similar with Thais, don't you think? Since the parents are the survivors, they had to sweat their tears, working hard, brought the children to the US for the better future. So they strongly do hope that the only thing the children can pay back is to study well, like being a doctor, a lawyer, in order to take care of your parents well.
I get teased a lot in school, as you can imagine. It was very difficult because your parents have a certain expectation being from the East. And then we are raised in America and the westernized world is not something they're familiar with. So a prime example would be, you want to go to a dance at school. That's something that they don't do and they don't allow you to do. So that makes it very difficult, because you want to do what the American friends are doing, but yet your Asian parents, that's not something that they want you to do. So that becomes very difficult. Perseverance, you gotta have perseverance. You gotta be able to stand on your own 2 feet. You gotta work hard. And that old mentality of, you gotta work hard to get to where you need to be, it's still very true. But set goals and dream big, because one day you will get there.
For the push factors, the damage after the secret wars, such as agricultural hardship, and the concentration camp after the United States left. The second one, political turmoil. After Laos declared its independence from France, the monarchy was also overthrown by the communists, which would lead Laos into economic hardship. Also, an armed conflict between Pathet Lao forces allied with North Vietnam and the royal government of Laos which was pro-American, extended from the Vietnam War. Laotians were very hopeful from the passage of Indochina Migration and Refugee Assistance Act of 1975, stating that the U.S. would aid Vietnamese and Cambodian refugee settlement. And also, America would provide a better political, educational, and social opportunities for them. Prior to 1975, the immigrants had no significant record because there were so few, but after the pass of the Indochina Migration and Refugee Assistance Act of 1975 by the Congress, though it benefited Vietnamese and Cambodians, it provided the Laotian immigrants more chances to migrate to the States just like the others. Most of them were former government administrators, soldiers from the Royal Army, and more recent immigrants, such as farmers and villagers who were not as educated as their ancestors. Comparing to thousands of Vietnamese or Cambodian immigrants, there were only 800 Laotians migrated into the U.S. Some critics said that the new Laotian government might remain its peacefully ruled manner and did not cause much conflict between the Hmong and the Pathet Lao. Then the first largest influx was between 1979 to 1981, when more than 105,000 refugees arrived in the U.S. Then from 1986 to 1989, the second wave of Laotians arrived with around 52,000. Since many of the refugees had to cross over the Mekong River, entering Thailand's border and seeking for safety in Thai refugee camp for a while, the United States were unwilling to accept these refugees, viewing them as economic migrants rather than political oppression migrants. Currently, there are many non-profit organizations continue to support and assist for Laotian Americans. For example, the Southeast Asia Resources Action Center, Laotian American National Alliance, and the Lao American Women Association.
ศูนย์นาโพนี่เกือบโมเมนต์2 ปีเพิ่นว่า81ฮอด83เด้2 ปีเด้มาอเมริกามีตั้งแต่ข่าวลือบ่มีข่าวจริงนี่นะก็ฟังวิตล้อฟังล้อแบบเลื่อนลอยบางคนก็ใจบ่ทนกระโตนจากศูนย์หนีข้ามกับคืนลาวตอนที่เขาสิบอกว่าสิได้มาว่าโตมันเบาแม่นแท้มันแม่นมืออีหลีบ่หั่นน่ะแล้วเขาก็เอามือต่อมาเขาก็รถบัสมาขี่เอารถบัสมาพามาออกจากยนต์มาเบิ่งป่านเมืองสวรรค์นะมากลางคืนนี่ตกลงมายนต์มากลางคืนอยู่ John F Kennedy Airport
Hmong and Laotian refugees have been settling in California since the 1970s, and now there are about 160,000 Hmong and Laotian people in the state. San Diego is a landing ground for many Lao immigrants and refugees, mostly in the southeast part of town, where the first Laotian temple in the United States was established in 1980. It is quite hard for Laotians for adapting into this new society because of the cultural clash. They are not used to touching, kissing, slapping someone on the back, waving, pointing feet at another person, or looking directly into someone's eyes. These are considered rude in Laos culture.
There are so many tales to tell, and I am especially interested in having Lao Americans be part of the dialogue. as a Lao American, I want to inspire other Lao Americans to pursue careers in entertainment. I stand on the shoulders of strong and creative people who came here because of war to escape, to find a better place in America. I'm surrounded by my peers who are Korean American, Chinese American, Filipino American, and I love their culture and their diversity of stories. I love seeing their faces on TV. I love reading their words in the paper and press. As important it is for you to speak your truth and to have a clear voice, maybe more so in these divisive times is to listen and to actively listen, because we live together, we live cooperatively, and I think we need everybody to grow.
Many Laotian American professionals are multilingual and serve as interpreters, negotiators, counselors, organization executives, and educators. One of the major problems is their English skills and unfamiliar with industrial society when they first arrived from agricultural-based homeland. They had to settle in urban areas where they could find work with less skills or language proficiency. Undoubtedly, Laotian Americans would deal with low-paid jobs, and some of them had to work several jobs in order to keep their financial steady, which resulted their underage children to be home alone or not properly well supervised. As a result of the 1996 Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act that expanded the definition of what types of crimes could determine detention or deportation, more than 16,000 Southeast Asian Americans have received orders of removal since 1998, especially under the Trump administration. In Laos, calling them Laotian might cause you in trouble because the word also attached with war and colonialism. It is derived from the French adjective Laotian or Laotian, used by the French during the country's colonial occupation from 1893 to 1945. Unfortunately, Laotian is the only representative word for Laos immigrants in the U.S. or the U.S.-born Laos. It's basically up to your historical knowledge deciding how to call them.
I am Khan Supanusimpon.
So that's pronounced Khan, right? Nice to meet you.
Oh! What the hell are you trying to do? Hank?
Oh, damn! Oh, you have damn fine house.
Oh, hey! I would like to make a toast to Hank and Peggy Hill, Billy. Ha! Hey, Hank! Look, man, it's the early birds. Hey, Hank, our flight say time is yours. I saw you leave house at 10 a.m. We leave 5 hours later. You still waiting, you dumb redneck. I can't help you. I can't help any of you stupid people. How does this machine work, Mr. Khan? How do I print? How do I save? It's Control S, you morons. It's always Control S.
Meanwhile, she served as a member of Minnesota Democratic Farmer Labor Party as the first Hmong American woman elected to a state legislature from 2002 to 2011. As chairperson of Judiciary Committee, she held the highest office of any Hmong American politician. Moore was born in Siang Khong, Laos. After the war, her family fled to Thailand, eventually seeking refugee status in the United States. Also, Moore served as the president and executive director of Asian Americans Advancing Justice until 2017.
I was born in a thatch roof bamboo hut in a small jungle village in northern Laos, where there was no electricity or running water. My personal journey from the mountains of war-torn Laos to a refugee camp in Thailand, to the halls of the Minnesota State Senate, and now the steps of our nation's capital is an improbable story that can happen only in America. Those early days of our refugee resettlement experiences was really tough for those of us who were part of the largest wave of Asians who came to this country in the late 70s and 80s. And yet we thrive despite the overt racism and bigotry that we encountered. You know, compared to so many of our relatives who perished along our flight to freedom, we had survived and we were given the chance to live.
Alright, let's move on to the next country, which is Vietnam. Let's start with the background information of Vietnam. Vietnam, or officially called the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. It is a long-stretched country along the eastern coast of the Indo-Chinese Peninsula. Vietnam borders China, Laos, Cambodia, and the South China Sea. It has an area of 331,000 square kilometers. Vietnam is slightly larger than the United States of New Mexico. It has a population of 97.3 million people in 2020, and it is the 15th most populous country in the world. Capital city of Vietnam is Hanoi, former capital of the Republic of Vietnam. A larger city is the Ho Chi Minh City, which is also known as Sai Nguyen. For the background history of Vietnam, France has occupied all of Vietnam by 1884. Independence was declared after World War II, but the French continued to rule until 1954, when they were defeated by communist forces under Ho Chi Minh, who took control of the north. So nowadays, there are still some people speaking French. U.S. economic and military aid to South Vietnam grew to the 1960s in an attempt to bolster the government, but U.S. armed forces were withdrawn following the ceasefire agreement in 1973. 2 years later, North Vietnam forces overran the South. Economic reconstruction of the reunited country has proven difficult as aging Communist Party leaders. Characterization of immigrant. Self-respect is typical Vietnamese characteristic. They do not like accepting help from others because gratefulness is considered a debt. The Vietnamese are extremely hardworking and are long-suffering. Because of most of the Vietnamese people were born in poor conditions, they have to work hard for a living day by day. Confucianism and other Vietnamese religions and beliefs, such as Buddhism and Taoism, are widely worshipped by Vietnamese people. They often pray God for health, wealth, and happiness. Friendship is much appropriate for Vietnamese. They consider it as important as their family or even more than that. Therefore, in Vietnam, there is a popular saying that next-door neighbors are much more important than distant relatives. Their hospitality is shown clearly in the way they greet and treat their friends and visitors. For the situation in the old country, the main push factor for Vietnam immigrants is the Vietnam War, but first, we have to understand what is the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War was a conflict between Communist North and the government of South Vietnam. Ho Chi Minh, a revolutionary leader, declared independence from France after the French had surrendered and declared a ceasefire. Vietnam was divided at the 17th parallel, resulting in the Democratic Republic of Vietnam in the north and Republic of Vietnam in the south. Citizens were given the opportunity to move between the two borders. Ngo Dinh Diem was given power to South Vietnam, while Ho Chi Minh was given power to North Vietnam. The Geneva Accord took place and it stated that the unification of Vietnam is to occur through the means of election, but the South Vietnam did not sign the accord, and they were not united. After failing to unify Vietnam through the means of election, North Vietnam has decided Vietnam is going to be unified through force, and this sparked the beginning of the Vietnam War. For the push factor, as we mentioned earlier, political repression continued to make life difficult for those individuals who are detained at or released from re-education camps, as well as their family members. Economic hardship, exacerbated by natural disaster and poor harvest in the year following the war, creating a widespread sense of hopelessness. Incessant warfare with neighboring countries further drained Vietnam's resources for capital investment and development. For pull factor, the first pull factor would be home for refugees. Vietnam was in a war and many were looking for a refuge to hide and be safe from war. And many found that in America or Australia. Next, a pull factor would be camp for the immigrant. The U.S. accepted the Vietnamese and has set up camp to help get the Vietnamese immigrant family on their feet. Lastly, it would be the better government. The government for Vietnam was poor and many immigrants to get better government and service for America. Vietnamese refugees fled the country in several significant waves. The first wave surged at the fall of Saigon in 1975. It is a group of refugees made up primarily of South Vietnamese government officials, U.S.-related personnel, and members of the Vietnamese elite. Second wave, which became known as the crisis of the boat people, hit the American shore on the late 1970s. A large proportion of the boat people were Sino-Vietnamese. Third wave occurred in the early 1980s. It is a group consists of the boat people as well as those leaving Vietnam under the U.S. Orderly Department program. In late 1989, a distinct group, Amerasian children and their families, entered the United States in large number under the U.S. Homecoming Act. In the early 1990s, another large group of refugees reached the American shore under the U.S. Humanitarian Operation Program. Most of the immigrants from Vietnam have made California their home. 40% of the country's nearly 1.3 million Vietnamese immigrants reside in California, concentrated in Orange, Los Angeles, and Santa Clara counties. New York coming in second and Texas the third. Southern California, Texas, and Louisiana Gulf Coast were magnets because of the warmer climate. The warmer climate allowed for easy farming, and this was crucial because the Vietnamese people are no stranger to farming, and they could easily raise money this way. For the contribution to American society, nationwide 43% of nail salon technicians are Vietnamese American. In California, 85% of the nail technicians are Vietnamese American. In the Gulf Coast region, Vietnamese American produce 45 to 85% of the region's shrimp business. In 1990, Vietnamese American intellectuals in Houston established the Vietnamese Science and Culture Association. It's a non-profit organization focused on teaching Vietnamese culture and leadership skills and providing education assistance for younger generation of Vietnamese Americans. The association now has 4 divisions in Austin, Dallas, Toronto, and Washington. Vietnamese restaurants in the United States are among the widely appreciated contributions to American life. Rice is the basis for most Vietnamese meals and is served with a variety of side dishes. most of which are spicy. Pho, a rice noodle soup, is a popular breakfast and a lunch meal. Vietnamese refugees still hold on their own culture by opening Vietnamese restaurants, speaking Vietnamese at home, and participating in multicultural festivals. What exactly happened with assimilation attempt is to blending of the two cultures. The children of Vietnamese refugees consider themselves to be Vietnamese American, existing within a culture that is both Vietnamese and American. They adopt certain aspects of American culture while still maintaining their Vietnamese root, creating a dual identity for these children. The younger generation of the immigrants dress more Americanized and only wear ao dai, the national garment for the special occasion, or less popular in American society. Vietnamese parents take pride in their children's education achievement and encourage their children to attend the American class, to be good in school, and to enter professional field to achieve and enjoy a better life. Although Vietnamese Americans predominantly practice Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism, 29 to 40% are Roman Catholic. Language was the first barrier that Vietnamese refugees had limited English proficiency. Vietnamese had a tonal language. They use variation in tone to differentiate between meanings of a sound. Due to the cultural differences, punishment is accepted in Vietnamese society as an effective way of educating children. It is completely different to American norm. Using punishment is disagreeable. Young Vietnamese American straightforwardness of expression may be perceived as disrespectful to their elders. Earlier immigrants worked at low-paying jobs in a small service or industry. Finding work was more difficult for second wave and subsequently immigrants due to their limited educational background and job skill. They were employed in blue-collar jobs such as electrical engineering and machine assembling. There was not much law targeting the Vietnamese immigrant in the past, since the United States welcomed the Vietnamese who refuged from the communist north of Vietnam. Similar to Laos, Cambodia, the Indochina Immigrant and Refugee Assistance Act was passed on May 23, 1975, under President Gerald Ford. It was a response to the false signal at the end of the Vietnam War. Under this act, approximately 130,000 refugees from South Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia were allowed to enter the United States under a special status, and the act held them to located and financial assistance. For the American Homecoming Act of 1987, it was the first federal law that substantially eased the immigrant of American children born during the Vietnam War, mostly the offspring of the American fathers and Vietnamese mother. By 2009, about 25,000 Vietnamese Americans and 60,000 to 70,000 of their relatives had immigrated to the United States under this law. The first famous Vietnamese American is Margaret Dennis Quincy. She's an American actress, model, and animal rights activist. She was born in Honolulu, Hawaii, to a father of Polish and Irish descent and a Vietnamese mother. Her parents met during the Vietnam War. She has a starring role in the action film Mission Impossible 3. She portrayed Tori Wu in the dystopian science fiction action film Divergent.
ETA 30 seconds.
See you in 30. Signorina O'Neill de Mea, dovrei essere in lista, grazie.
Mi dispiace ma il suo nome non c'è.
Deve esserci un errore. Sono stata...
Scusami, collega!
Pronto 3, Cecchino Nord, codice 7, via del codice 4.
Signorina De Mea?
Sì.
Solo un istante.
Perimetro di sicurezza controllato, controlliamo traffico uscito dalla cappella.
Signorina, doveva essere in lista. È colpa mia.
The next one is the Kelly Marie Trans. She's an American actress. Her parents were Vietnamese refugees who had settled in the United States following the Vietnam War. She began acting in 2011, with most of her role being in short film and television. She came to global prominence for her role as Rose Tico in the 2017 film Star Wars: The Last Jedi and the 2019 film Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. The last one is Eugene Huchon, Jean Trinh. He was born in 1950 in Saigon, Vietnam, and was raised from the age of 2 in Paris, France, and has lived in the United States since 1968. He's a Vietnamese-American biochemist who fled aboard NASA Space Shuttle mission STS-50 as a payload specialist, becoming the first Vietnamese-American astronaut in space. The Vietnamese also face the stereotype like other Asians, but the specific stereotype for the Vietnamese would be that you have to study hard to become a doctor, or your family will disown you, and they will look down on your English. Another stereotype you will definitely see is when you walk into a salon or nail salon, that it will be most likely to be run and done by Vietnamese women or family.
The Kingdom of Cambodia is located in Southeast Asia, where its neighbor is Thailand, Vietnam, Laos, and the Gulf of Thailand. Cambodia is having elective constitutional monarchy and currently Narodom Sihamuni, and he was chosen by the royal council of the throne as the head of state. The current prime minister is Hun Sen. He is the longest serving non-royal leader in Southeast Asia who has been governing since 1985. In 1975, the Khmer Rouge came to power and implemented an extreme version of agricultural-based communism. The new government may have killed as many as 2 million Cambodians in its attempt to reshape society. As a result, thousands of Cambodians fled the country. Vietnam's invasion of Cambodia in 1979 intensified the exodus. Cambodian Americans are members of one of the youngest ethnic groups in American society. They also live in larger families than average Americans. Cambodian immigrants came from rural areas, lack of relevant job skills, and not fit in the American society that well, but surprisingly, Cambodians who were born in America sometimes consider themselves as American because they have no memory of the motherland. Fled from the brutal Khmer Rouge from killing and torturing millions of Cambodians and destroyed all the major institutions. Many Cambodians died from execution, hunger, disease, injuries, and forced labors. Moreover, Indochina Migration and Refugee Assistance Act of 1975 is the pull factor. The large numbers of refugees coming to the United States from Southeast Asia led to the American government to establish a resettlement program, which was created by this piece of legislation. Before fleeing to the United States, Cambodian refugees first seek their freedom in its neighbor Thailand. Though the condition in the refugee camp was poor, but it paved the way for greater opportunity in America. With the U.S. refugee program began accepting Cambodians from refugee camps in Thailand, a large wave of Cambodian immigration to America since 1979. Between 1980 to 1984, approximately 75,000 Cambodians arrived in the United States. With the resettlement program by the U.S., many volunteer agencies helped find financial sponsors to support the new immigrants and help them adjust to American society. 55% of the Cambodian refugees resettled in areas that had been abandoned and distressed, not just the Bronx in New York City in the 80s, but Providence, Rhode Island, Philadelphia, and Massachusetts. However, the largest Cambodian Americans community is in California, where close to 70,000 or nearly half of the people of Cambodian ethnicity have settled.
Unlike many Asian ethnic communities in New York City, there aren't the kind of normal ethnic signifiers that you see here in the Bronx for the Cambodian population. Restaurants, mom and pop shops, even social clubs. You don't see the signage like you do in Chinatown or Koreatown. And that's because the refugees who came here were largely penniless. They were not capitalized ethnic entrepreneurs that could then establish what sociologists call an ethnic economy.
Because the Cambodian population is shrinking, those still here have to fight harder to make sure their community is being served.
Alright, move on to how they assimilate. Adjusting to American society has been difficult for most Cambodians. However, Cambodian immigrants already gain sympathy around the world, including Americans, from a news showing their difficulty in the refugee camp in Thailand. For their contribution to American society, Hemarat is among the most famous Cambodian Americans. He is best known for his Oscar-winning portrayal of the Cambodian interpreter and journalist. Next, Protpran in the film of the Killing Field. He was born in rural Cambodia. He worked his way through medical school and became an obstetrician and surgeon in Phnom Penh. After the Khmer rule took over in 1975, his family was killed by them. He escaped to Thailand in 1979 and came to the United States in 1980. Aside from a successful acting career, he held 6 organizations devoted to caring for Southeast Asia refugees and resettling them in the West. In 1996, he was murdered outside his home in Los Angeles, California. The Cambodian immigrant faced a strong opposition from Americans due to the economic problem in the United States at that time. Moreover, racism was widespread as well. Economic challenge. Similar to other Southeast Asian immigrants, they had to work for low-paid jobs like seafood processing industry. Some Cambodians who were professionals also struggled with finding jobs, so unemployment rate was high.
Between 1975 and 1994, more than 1 million Southeast Asians came to the U.S. as part of this country's largest refugee resettlement program. Many from Cambodia came to the Bronx in the 1980s, as many residents there were leaving. Now the story of the Bronx Cambodians is being told in a new book.
I'm a girl who was born in Cambodia, grew up in the refugee camps, and raised in the Bronx. And that identity, to me, the core of that is being Cambodian.
Chaya Chom was a young girl when she arrived in the Bronx with her family. Her mother had fled Cambodia when the brutal Khmer Rouge regime took over the country, killing and torturing millions. The lucky ones found themselves in camps in Thailand and the Philippines. Chom says her mother, who moved from camp to camp, longed to move to the U.S. wanting a better life for her children.
And in the refugee camps, before we came, they showed you videos of what it was like to live in the United States, and how to open the television, the refrigerator. So it was an opportunity for me, not necessarily for herself, but for her two children, my sister and I, to thrive, because she survived the war and violence.
In 1985, as part of the largest refugee resettlement program in the U.S., Chom's family found themselves in the Bronx.
So this building right here, where the Battambang market sits, was one of the first buildings that Cambodian refugees were resettled into.
Professor Eric Tang is a former community organizer in the Bronx and a recent fellow at CUNY's Asian American Asian Research Institute. He's author of the new book, Unsettled: Cambodian Refugees in the New York City Hyper-Ghetto.
After the 1960s, many of the middle-class families moved out of the ghetto, were pushed out, and left behind were the poorest of the poor. And so sociologists refer to this new era of the ghetto, which is not just racially segregated, but economically homogeneously poor, as hyper-ghettos.
For the law in 1980, the Refugee Act of 1980 was established in order to limit the number of refugees who could enter to the United States each year. Famous Cambodian American stereotype. Because Cambodian culture has a high value on politeness and no direct confrontation with senior, Americans sometimes have an image of them as passive. On the other hand, their passivity might be the result of their unfamiliarity with larger American society and the English language. For the popular media, the first one is Angelina Jolie. She was given Cambodian citizenship in 2005, now holding dual citizenship. She performed in several movies, but my favorite one is Maleficent.
Mistress, I have a little bit of news.
Don't ruin my morning.
Philip asked me to marry him.
No.
I wasn't really asking.
Nor was I. Love doesn't always end well, Beastie.
Trust me. Let us prove you wrong.
You have done an admirable job going against your own nature to raise this child. But now, she will finally get the love of a real mother. Tonight, I consider Aurora my own.
There is no union. There will be no wedding.
What have you done?
We go home now. Aurora!
The next one is Yasmin Lee. She's an LGBT pornographic actress. And the last one, Hagen Escott, Oscar-winning actor for his performance in the movie The Killing Field, and also an author and physician.
Each country has its own specific push and pull factors, but they often faced with similar stereotypes such as the mistaken identity. For example, someone might ask where you're from when you're born and raised in California. Moreover, Lao, Cambodian, and Vietnamese are always perceived as hardworking, nerdy, and polite because of their cultural differences in America. It is also a very common stereotype for Vietnamese that they own at least one salon. Lack of language skill, law-abiding, and strict tradition are also stereotyped.